Hello everybody, Shinjo here, welcome back to the channel and to the top 10 anime of 2024. So I don't remember exactly how I did things last year when I was doing my rankings, but at least for this year, I'm making this video counting down my top 10s of new franchises, and then in another video, I'm going to be talking about my top 5 sequels. Because otherwise, the sequels would overpower the top 10. It will be a lot of sequels put together. I feel like it's easier to separate the original series and the sequels because, especially for a lot of sequels, if you watch the initial season, you're going to watch the sequel. So essentially, this episode is going to be discussing 10 anime series that I watched from 2024 that I genuinely enjoyed. But before I get into the list proper, there is an honorable mention that I need to bring up, and that is Magie Lumiere. It's a show that I didn't really expect much, but the more the show went on, the more I did genuinely enjoy it. While I wish that the climax at the end of the show would have been better to actually resolve the big conflict, I'm sure that that's going to be touched upon in future seasons. And as well, anything that isn't included in the list already is an honorable mention. One that I do feel of a bit of a shame that I excluded is Blue Box, but I'm only 4 episodes in at the moment, so I feel like it's unfair to rank it, especially since it's going to be carrying over into this year. Officially at number 10 is Train to the End of the World. I don't know how many people actually watch this show. I feel like it kind of fell under the radar for a lot of people, but I really enjoyed the premise of it from the beginning. The plot was interesting enough and really unique. The world, while it is a bit zany, is really interesting. The characters are fun, and the dialogue is honestly realistic. Although you could argue if kids of those ages are having the dialogues that they have, but at the same time, it's just really fun. It's going to be a show that I really enjoyed going into it, and what I honestly expected will be further up on the list, but the more I thought about it, the more I enjoyed the future entries in this list, and the plot was fun, but it does get super predictable by the end of the show. So that's part of the reason that it's at number 10. At number 9, we have Wistoria, Wand and Sword. So, I remember when the season was leading up to this, and I read the description of the show, I remember either saying it out loud or in my head that it was really close to Black Clover, at least from the premise. But while it is close to Black Clover, I honestly enjoy it more than Black Clover. For one thing, it's a lot shorter, it's a lot easier to get somebody to invest in the show. The characters, while they are sort of one note, they don't necessarily fall into stereotypes. And I do enjoy the pacing of it, and for the short run that it had, I did enjoy the show. But honestly, unless it gets another season, which I don't know for sure if it actually is, it is going to be a show that gets fallen by the wayside. So for what it's worth, I did enjoy the show, but if it doesn't get anything in a couple of years, it's going to be another show that just is forgotten about, unfortunately. At number 8 is Mission Yozakura Family. So already, Yozakura Family has an edge over the other 2 entries in this list so far, because it had essentially double the amount of episodes that those ones did. What I like about the show is the plot is really interesting, the characters are fun. I especially like a lot of the members in the family. I think the only member of the family that I'm not really a fan of is the older brother, but that's mainly from the fact that him bullying Tayo does get really tiring early on in the show. And there are a good chunk of characters in the middle of the show that get introduced that are either hit or miss, but I do think overall it was enjoyable. Obviously, based off of this, I enjoyed it more than Wistoria, but at the same time, it only really got me invested in the second half of the show. At number 7 is The Tales of Girls Who Couldn't Be Magicians. So, initially I watched either the first 2 or 3 episodes of this, essentially back to back. and then waited until maybe a week or two back that I finished the rest of the show, and I do really enjoy it. The characters in the main class are all really memorable. While I may not be able to remember their names offhand, they are characters that I'll be able to remember. That's the railroad guy, that's the mic guy, that's the cooking lady. Even the plot about what's going on really at the school and the mystery of it, even the main teacher is really fun. Honestly, a lot of characters I really enjoyed, but outside of recency bias, the main reason it's this far up on the list is I just like how it looks. The pastel really works well with the show, and initially when I was gonna binge this and Magie Lumiere, I expected that Magie Lumiere would make it, but not this show. Number 6 is The Elusive Samurai. Again, feels like a little bit of an underground pick from what I'm seeing, but I really enjoyed the show. Again, like a lot of the other ones, the really interesting premise at the start of it was really cool. The story does kind of hit a roadblock near the middle, because there was literally an episode where the guy can't see the future and everybody's worried about it, but he wants to keep it a secret. There were a couple of episodes like that were kind of filler-like, but I really enjoyed the first episode. I remember going into the first episode and the opening song hits at the very beginning and it just floors me. Honestly, one of my favorite openings from this year, although there are a lot of good ones. And even the animation, or as some veterans call it, Sakuga, are really well done. While the animation doesn't entirely ruin or help a show for me, it does genuinely look really good. And more than likely for a lot of people, you'd be more willing to watch a show that looks good over ones that typically don't. But overall, a really cool show, and for somebody like me that isn't really a huge fan of history anime, I really did enjoy this. At number 5, right in the middle, is Girls Band Cry. I'm noticing that a lot of these seem like they're kind of under the radar for a lot of people. But I do feel like, from what I've heard around, that Girls Band Cry's streaming options were not exactly good. Like, for example, I know a few years back when Summertime Render was out, it was available on Disney Plus, and I don't even think it was out on Hulu at the moment. But regardless, Girls Band Cry is really cool. For starters, the characters are older, which in my opinion puts it a step above shows like K-On! Where the girls are still in high school. The plots and the ideas that the characters get involved in is really realistic. Like, for example, the one girl wants to try and break away from a tradition that her family's done for generations. And even the main girl is really funny. The dynamics between the girls is really intriguing and really fun to watch. But I think the biggest part that really sells it for me is the show is CG, but it actually looks good. For a lot of anime fans, CG is something that is always seen as a negative for a lot of anime. But with shows like this, and I know Land of the Lustrous, they are really done expertly well. And initially, I was gonna watch this and Jellyfish, that Jellyfish anime that came out this year. I was gonna continue the Jellyfish and drop this because it didn't really appeal to me at the moment. But it turns out, just like earlier, I continued this and didn't finish the Jellyfish anime. Amazing to see how much my taste changed in 1 year. At number 4, we have Dead Dead Demons Destruction. I had to make sure I read it exactly what it says. So, this show... So for starters, I heard people talk about this. It's an OVA or an ONA, regardless. But I've heard people talk about this, but I just didn't think it appealed to me. For starters, the title is certainly a mouthful. But last week, I decided to give it a chance and watch it. And I'm only 4 or 5 episodes into the show at the moment. I'm really enjoying it. It's one of those that's very reminiscent from Train to the End of the World that I mentioned earlier, where it's a bit of a wacky story and a very interesting concept, and the mystery is built up around it. And so far from what I've seen, I really enjoy it. And Just from the fact that I haven't finished the show, feels like it means something that it's even on this list in the top 5. But the one thing I really like about the show is Auron. She easily steals the show in this. She is just a really fun character, and the fact that she just has so many out of left field remarks during the show is just really fun to see. Obviously, I haven't finished the show, no spoilers, but I'm really excited to see where this goes. In the top 3 is Dragon Ball Daima. I knew I had to include it here. For starters, it looks really good. The fights are very solid. And in my opinion, it's a return to form for Dragon Ball. Because while I don't know the entire consensus that everybody felt with Dragon Ball Super, because I didn't start it from when it began airing, I know a lot of people don't like how the early episodes were movie recaps and the animation did look kind of shoddy in a couple of spaces, but I do genuinely enjoy this. The idea with what exactly is Glorio doing with Arinsu, everything involving the Majins, the fact that we got some really solid fight scenes like I mentioned, is all really good. The one thing I don't like is some of the jokes are repetitive. Like Goku constantly having to use the bathroom is a weird joke that they keep on bringing up. And not to mention Goku continually mispronouncing Glorio's name does get tiring as well. But who knows? That might be a joke that they're setting up for the future, or it may just be a gag that they're doing. Either way, I am really enjoying the show, and I'm excited to see where it goes as well. At the runner-up spot is Dan Da Dan. Like I mentioned when I discussed this for Let's Talk Anime, which may or may not be out at this point, it's a show that I feel like a lot of people are going to put as their number 1, and in my opinion, I wouldn't exactly disagree. I do really like the show. It is very solid. The beginning episode 1, and even into episode 2, do have a bit of awkward scenes that you kind of have to ease somebody into to kind of set them up for what exactly is happening. But the characters are fun, and the Sakuga is really good as well. But like I mentioned earlier, the Sakuga isn't always what ruins or helps a show for me. At the same time, I may have been inclined to put it as number 1 if they wouldn't have left season 1 on a cliffhanger. Now, I know that they already have a season 2, but I just don't really like the fact that they're holding out hope that a season 2 was even going to happen in the first place. And I just don't like the idea of waiting for months to get an answer to everything that was built up. But at the same time, it's a really good show. I'm not going to fault anybody for putting it at number 1, but it's my list. So at number 1 is Makanai, Too Many Losing Heroines. So the season this came out, I immediately fell in love with it. I wouldn't say it's entirely bad looking. It certainly doesn't have Sakuga compared to Dan Da Dan, but I do just really like how it looks. I like the character designs. I love the characters in general. They're really fun. The story, while a bit bland for some people, I do really enjoy. It's just the idea about everybody losing at love, that they just all hover over this one dude. And like I mentioned with Girls Band Cry earlier, how it's realistic, the scenarios in this, especially with Komari trying to keep the club afloat, is really relatable, at least for me. And while I did dock points from Dragon Ball Daima for their repetitive jokes, the joke of Yanami constantly eating doesn't really take over the show as much, in my opinion. While a lot of people may disagree about Dan Da Dan not being number 1, I do think overall, Too Many Losing Heroines is my favorite of the season. Again, maybe a bit of an underground pick, but I do genuinely enjoy the show, and even some of the minor characters, like the main character's little sister, she's really fun as well. But there are my top 10 anime of the year. It will be hard to believe if everybody has the exact same list as me. Let me know what your list is down below in the comment section, and I hope you enjoyed this video. I'll see you next time. Momentai.